My name is Alika Lindsay. Thank you for coming today to this Lunch and Learn. We are recording this session. I do not think it will take a full hour. And at the end, I will stop recording and we will discuss the upcoming triennial review because I have some updates for you, but we don't need that on the YouTube. So stay for the end. And if you are watching this on YouTube and it's prior to August 1st through 5th and you have questions about the triennial review, please email me. I'm happy to answer questions. Okay, so this is not going to be a super extensive overview of all the changes that they are proposing to make to the uniform guidance. This is just going to focus on 5310. The proposed changes are over 300 pages long. 300, is that right? 30, 300? I don't know, something big. And there were over 300,000 comments submitted. So I will only be covering a short summary of brief topics that may affect you. If you receive other federal grants, I highly recommend doing some of the other trainings out there that summarize all these changes. The APTA, I don't know what APTA stands for, but they did some webinars, also because the BUILD Act is also getting changes. So if you do a lot of construction grants, you may want to learn about the changes coming through BUILD. The National Grant Management Association, NGMA, also had webinars covering and summarizing the upcoming changes. We are just going to cover these topics: subrecipient monitoring, payment reimbursement requests, allowable costs, procurement, what they're saying about termination and suspension, program purpose and alignment, and then what you should take away from this Lunch and Learn. Again, everyone's muted, but if you have questions, you should see a little hand symbol at the top by the chat. You can click that or type something into the chat. I will check the chat at the end because I can't have it open at the same time because I have too many things open on my screens. Okay, so why are we talking about this today? The OMB, it has a lot of names. It's also called the 2 CFR Part 200. That is the section of the CFR that covers grants and agreements and contracts. And it's also called the Uniform Guidance or the Super Circular. There's a lot of different names depending on what sector you work in and what you use it for. They often make changes and open it for public comment before those changes take effect. But this time is unique because they had so many proposed changes, a lot of them based off of executive orders that were made and how to incorporate those executive orders into the uniform guidance. I'm not looking at the camera, I've been looking at the wrong spot, sorry. Okay, none of these changes are final yet. They were open for public comment period, which closed on the 13th. Don't panic. There were over 300,000 comments, and I have heard that there may be litigation against some of these changes. We also submitted some comments for things that may affect subrecipients. So nothing's final yet, but proposed changes are supposed to take effect October 1st, 2026. But if these changes go through litigation, it could be longer. I've never seen that happen before, so this is unique, and it will be interesting to see how it plays out. What is not changing is 5310 and what our mission is. That stays the same. And formula funds are relatively safe from a lot of the discretionary language and the termination language that they're adding. So I don't want you to be too afraid of that. But if you and your agency apply for competitive or discretionary federal grants, you probably want to look more into that and find out what these changes are. Okay. Subrecipient monitoring. our monitoring program is already pretty good, but we don't have to start over or anything. We do risk assessments. We use those risk assessments in the application, and they help us make awarding decisions. We also use those for determining site visits. And I'm really glad that we put all of that in place because a few years ago, they started saying we recommend risk assessments. And slowly that is shifting to you are required to do risk assessments. And now, not only are you required to do risk assessments, but you will be required to show us how you use those risk assessments to make special conditions and determinations for subrecipients. So the oversight and documentation requirements are just increasing and will probably keep increasing over time. So I think we're a little bit ahead of the game just because we started doing those already. We started improving our site visits. Every year we get a little bit better on that. We improve our policies a little bit more. So I'm glad and comfortable at where we're at currently. There are some provisions and language that are new that I've never seen before, such as a provision that will allow the federal agency to direct a pass-through entity to terminate a subaward based on significant reputational harm. So a lot of the pushback on some of these changes are because of language that is vague or undefined, and I think this would be one of those things. They don't define what reputational harm is, and it just says like if it significantly damages the reputation of the pass-through entity or the federal agency, then we could terminate your award. So we will see if that type of language sticks, or if they end up not putting it in. We will let you know. What else? Corrective actions. They're putting more weight on corrective actions, which typically were just a recommendation of best practice. But if they put that in that it's required, then we will get a little more, we'll have to be a little more cautious with that, keep up on corrective actions, watch them more carefully, make sure that you finish corrective actions on time and resolve them. We've already started kind of putting more punitive rules about corrective actions, like if you don't respond to your site visit results within 90 days, then you get put on a corrective action period for 1 year. Those are new policies that we've put in place, which now I'm glad that we've put them in place because they're starting to require that type of thing. They are considering requiring that corrective actions are completed and verified, but also that special conditions can be placed, which we'll get into more. I think I have a section all about that. And then also just how do the subrecipients' activities continue to align with the approved 5310 purpose? So are you meeting the purpose of the program, which is to provide transportation to seniors and people with disabilities? Nothing's changed there. Reimbursement requests. So the good news is we already require backup documentation for every invoice, which they never required before. They were very careful about not telling us exactly how to do that and allowing pass-through entities to make their own policies on deciding how they would review invoices and how they would make sure that subrecipients are meeting the allowable costs. Now they want to be more specific about what documentation is required, how you're proving that these purchases are justified. They are also increasing the unallowable cost list, which we will get into a little bit more. So we've already gone above and beyond what the current standards were, which is great because now you are already used to tracking all your purchases, tracking all your receipts, organizing them together, and uploading them into Zoom Grants with your payment request, because that is going to be required if these proposed changes go through. So we're already doing that. But what is a new thing that they are proposing is justification for every expense. Now, in the past, or currently what our policy is we give you a list of these are absolutely allowed And then these are the things that are a little more gray. If it's something in this gray area, we need a written justification. But these proposed rules would require justification for every expense, even if it's obviously allowed. So it's a lot more documentation that they're requiring, and we would have to figure out how to best do that in a way that makes it easy for you. Maybe that's putting it in the cover sheet or creating something within Zoom grants where you can justify each purchase. And by justification, I do not mean a receipt. When I say justification, I mean you explaining how that purchase supports the mission of the program. So it's kind of heavy. We will see if that goes forward. And then always just tying the costs back to the program purpose and the project. Also, payment accountability. That's more for pass-through entities, but I just want you to be aware that there will be heavier. They want to enact heavier rules on pass-through entities for drawing down funds. So, more accountability on us if we drew down funds and paid you out for something that wasn't allowed. That's more on us, and there will be more accountability for things like that. Also, not drawing down funds on time. So our timelines that we've been getting stricter and stricter on every year are becoming, more tight. So we just have to be careful. I think we're doing great. We've already, implemented a lot of these rules ahead of time so that it won't be a huge shock to you all in the program that receive funds from us. Allowable costs. I will try not to get too into the weeds because there are so many changes that they're trying to enact on allowable costs, specifically like things that they want to add to the unallowables list. I did submit a public comment about how we don't want to get too specific, and as long as we can justify that it supports the program, that should be enough. Because if they keep adding more and more things to the unallowable list that are very specific, I think it will just create more argument for it wasn't on the unallowable list, so why can't I charge it? I just feel like it's a lot of, I don't know how to explain it. We'll talk about it later. The proposed changes include cost principle revisions that can affect outreach, public relations, publications, which I'll talk a little bit more about, conferences and memberships, which is a big one, subscriptions, marketing, lobbying, and advocacy related costs. These costs should not be charged unless they are clearly necessary, allowable, and tied to the approved award purpose. But not just that, they are also trying to completely get rid of any publications and printing. And that's something I also submitted a public comment on because I know a lot of people use federal funds and rely on federal funds to help with printing. I do printing. Travel training needs to print brochures. I'm sure a lot of other programs need to print brochures. Our temporary trips program requires a lot of printing. If we weren't doing vouchers require printing. So there's a lot of stuff where I really hope that they change their mind on that. Publications also don't affect us a lot, but a lot of agencies that receive federal funding are scientific and health related for things such as studies, actually planning. Planning's a big one too in transit planning, but health, if you received a grant to study cancer, now you can't use federal funding to get that publicized. I think that would be a mistake. So I hope that they look into that. But I won't give too much of my own opinion. But that's something you should look at if you do receive those types of federal funds for studies or planning or things like that. They do want to disallow all conference and membership charges. That is something else I know a lot of people are giving pushback on because not only do I rely on going to conferences and having memberships to keep up on all these federal changes, but also the country is very large and we have a lot of different FTA regions that handle programs differently. And so coming together and talking to other pass-through entities and agencies in the country help us have better practices and share how we handle certain situations and keep those regions, I think, hold them accountable because they can't be doing things to one state that they're not doing to another because we're talking. So taking away those places where we can communicate, I think is not a good idea. I also think that things like driver training, ADA training conferences, memberships for those types of things would affect our program specifically. I have informed ERSTA that this might be coming, and if they could help by producing a template or justification for memberships and conferences that could be downloaded from their website that you could fill out, that would be helpful. You know, if they don't ban conferences altogether. Advertising costs and public relations may become more restricted, so just keep in mind that you will be having to justify things a lot more. Yep, okay, I think I covered all that. Let's talk about procurement. Luckily for you, UTA handles most procurement for you. We procure vehicles. We have allowed small procurements to be done by subrecipients, but our new program management plan was updated to include some new wording, which I think will help us in the long run in case OMB changes are made now or in the future. We put in language that says if you are procuring as a subrecipient and we're not procuring for you, that you must have a written procurement policy that you submit to us and we review it. That way we can double check with any new changes to the federal regulation and make sure that your procurement policies meet the current guidelines. So that's something new that we added. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say PMP, just a reminder that it's the program management plan, and it kind of spells out how UTA runs the program. We rewrote it last year, I think, in 2025, and it was open for public comment. We received public comments, made changes, and then submitted it to FTA. FTA approved it, and now it's on our website. So that new program management plan is available. I will try to have some copies of that at the next post-award training so that you have copies of that as well. Let's see. So yeah, new procurement rules, but I don't think they will affect you a lot. Now that we will check your procurement policy, we can help you make sure that you're dotting the I's, crossing the T's. We did have some awards this year on like software, hardware, things like that. We don't know yet how those will be affected. So for now, we're just not going to think about it. And when the OMB changes actually take place, if those projects are affected, we will look at it then. But I think they're still below the minimum costs and it shouldn't affect anything. Okay, termination and suspension. Again, this is kind of, they're making it so termination and suspension will affect us more as the PTE, but it also, they want to make it so we are required to add language to our agreements, which we already have some language, but it's pretty vague and it's not very punitive. It's not very overreaching or mean, I would say. But if this goes through, we will have to change that language to be a bit more specific. They want to see how we will take special conditions, termination, or suspension on subrecipients who have high risk or unsupported costs, late reports, weak financial controls, poor performance, things like that. In the past, I've kind of left it up to the compliance officer on how they want to handle that kind of thing, because the federal government has never told us exactly how they want that to go. So it's been up to us to create our own policies and decide what we think is fair and what the compliance officer thinks is fair. If they require this language, we're going to have to make decisions on what the policies will be, put them in the agreements, and be more specific and fair and equitable too, but it will also feel more punitive to you who have been in the program for a long time, and we've been lenient in the past, and now all of a sudden there's stop payments and there's suspensions and there's more consequences for these things. So just be aware that that could be coming. They want more clear and consistent discretionary termination. So again, that will affect UTA, not really you, because this program is formula funds, not discretionary, which means you're not competing to the federal government for it, if that makes sense. We get the money every year, so we don't compete for it because it's based off of population. Grants that we are competing for, such as a bus and bus facilities grant, where we write a grant, we submit it to FTA, and we say, please give us money for buses this year. They could say no. That is called discretionary. So discretionary grants, they are trying to make it more easy to terminate through things like inconsistent with program goals or agency priorities, or doesn't support American values, or things like that. So some of the wording, again, is very vague and they haven't defined it. So we will see how that goes. Agency must provide a brief summary of the reasons for termination. That's some language that they want to put in there. So again, we would put that in our agreements if we're adding termination policies. New provision on discretionary temporary suspension of federal awards. They've actually already kind of put that into place because of some executive orders that came through. Now, if a grant goes past the period of performance date, they can freeze the funds. Does not apply to formula again. Yeah, okay. Let's move on. Program purpose and alignment. That hasn't changed, right? We are going to still have the same program purpose, but they are changing the program purpose a lot for more discretionary grants. The proposed rule emphasizes that federal funds should be used for public purpose authorized by law, not for unrelated activities, which is fine because 5310 is very clear on what the program purpose is. If you can answer the question, how does this improve transportation access for seniors and people with disabilities, then you're good. Where that might be a problem is other programs where the purpose is not extremely clear. Application materials, scopes of work, award notices, agreements, invoices, performance reports should all consistently connect activities to transportation access for seniors and people with disabilities. I think I talked about all that. Again, a lot more requirements on us as the pass-through entity that won't really affect you. But you should know that with discretionary grants, again, they have already terminated thousands of awards based on new administration policy preferences. And if they deem it anti-American activities and they're trying to put that same verbiage and language into the uniform guidance. So keep an eye on that if you do receive discretionary grants. I also saw one about land, that if any activities on land that is owned by a federal agency are deemed to violate or prevent First Amendment rights. So there are certain things like that you might want to keep an eye on to see if it goes through. A lot of vague, undefined language changes that are new. So, key takeaways. Things you can do now to prepare. Just keep your invoice backup clean. I know you all already do that, but keep it organized in files. Call it, this was quarter 1 for 5310, this was quarter 2 for 5310, whatever. Keep it organized. Luckily, when you submit it through Zoom grants, it stays in there, it's organized, and we have access to it also. So if you, for some reason, don't have it in your files, you could always go to Zoom grants and get it there. And then we also that gets put into our internal accounting system. Update your procurement files if you do procurement. Update your policies if you do procurement. Document outreach purpose. What I mean by that is if you're doing outreach or public communications or advertising or anything like that, make sure that you document the reasoning and the justification and how that ties back to your grant programs. Make sure you're submitting reports on time because, again, more punitive actions may come in the future, corrective actions, things like that. Ask before charging questionable costs. We always say that, but they're gonna be looking at it more closely in reviews. And then the big takeaway is more prove-it documentation. Costs must clearly be associated with 5310. I don't want you guys to panic. Just have good, clear, clean documentation. And if you have a person who does your invoicing for you, make sure that they have a quick and easy way to check that the costs are allowable and eligible before they put it into an invoice and submit it. We're going to have to be more careful about what we're allowing if these changes go through because the pass-through entity, which is us, may be more strongly punished. I don't want to say punished. I don't know the other word. We might get in more trouble, right? If we accidentally approve something that wasn't eligible. So we have to be stricter on how we're catching that stuff as well. So we ask that you're also catching that and not submitting anything. Also, as you noticed this last year, we had to add new language in Zoom grants that you certify that everything is true and that you're not committing fraud. So that also helps with that. I think that was from an executive order too. I didn't see that in the OMB updates. Maybe that was last time that they didn't update. I think they put that language in. So we've been doing pretty good at staying up on the updates, so I'm not too worried. There may be some other changes. They want to make circulars less guidance and more regulation. So it's kind of a bit more, I would say, overreach on how the programs are run and how I don't know. They've always kind of said this is a guidance and the words must or recommend or can are very important. But now they want to change it to regulation, which means everything is a must. So we'll see how that plays out. They want to increase scrutiny with timeframes and put more specific conditions on PTEs, us, and risk reviews. Also, I thought this was strange. They're looking at removing recommendations for the GAO's Green Book. If you're not in finance, you might not know what that is, but it's like I think it's like the GAGAS, the General Accepted Accounting Standards, and the Green Book is what they call it because it's like a big green book. It's been binding and recommended in the past that accountants use that when dealing with grant funds, and they're thinking of removing that. So if they do that, then we can no longer recommend that or check. I think we ask, like in our application and our site visit, we ask like, do your accountants follow the GAGAS? I know it's a bad name. I don't know. The General Accounting Standards. If the answer is no, then that can affect your risk assessment. I guess we're not, if this goes through, we can't do that anymore. So that's interesting. EEO policies also, they're saying that we need to be careful on wording that. I think what we do now is fine. We just ask if you have an EEO policy. We don't require that you have an EEO program that you're reporting to us, but we require that you have an EEO statement on your website. I think that will remain, but we can't recommend or require specific language. That's my guess. We will see how that plays out. Another thing that they're talking about is e-verify. They're thinking that the e-verify system, I think that's like with your driver's license and your voting, like the e-verify stuff. Or if you have, is it like when you get TSA PreCheck, I think you have to e-verify. I don't know. Sorry if I'm wrong. But that might be required for all grant-funded employees and contractors to check for immigration status and add more controls and oversight for that. Improper drawdowns also they're looking at discouraging cost reimbursement procurement program procurement. Ugh. Discouraging cost reimbursement I can't say it. Okay, I'll just try to explain it. For procurement contracts that are reimbursement based. So I'm not sure how that would affect us because I don't think they're talking about like small purchases that we do. I think they're talking more about like big construction stuff. I'm not totally sure. So we'll keep an eye on that. FTA might just require more review and approval of contracts than they do now. So if we're awarding you a contract, I know this application period, I required you to send me contracts so we could look at them ahead of time. That process might just get more defined and more specific, and FTA might review them before awarding. So we will see how that goes. They're softening language for DBE and small business. That shouldn't affect you, but it affects us. And increasing and improving our own policies on subrecipient termination to align with their policy preferences, which I already talked about. And then OMB is looking generally to prohibit conferences. We also went over that. I think we're good. One more thing was the notice of funding opportunity. They want to limit that to 30 days. We already meet that. I gave you guys at least 30 days, but we will put that in our program management plan if that becomes a rule or our policies. All right, I know that there's some questions in the chat. I'm going to stop recording here because then I'm going to talk about triennial review reminder also, and I will answer your questions. Okay, so if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for joining.